Leadership is such a misunderstood concept, I find. And I suppose historically, because leadership has tended to be defined by hierarchy and position and title, I find that people tend to find it difficult to separate position, title, hierarchy from the concept of leadership. But really, if we think about it, what does it mean to lead? If you are using a title or hierarchy or positional power or power even in a relationship, for example, to get somebody to do something, then that's not leadership. That's dictatorship. So leadership is really when we influence people, and influence being a win-win versus manipulation, win-lose. When we influence people positively and we and we get them to willingly follow us. And also the other concept is that when we separate leadership from a title, position, hierarchy, now it becomes a lot more fluid and situational. Morning. It becomes a lot more fluid and situational. And this is how leadership should be, because we live in an incredibly dynamic world and an increasingly complex world, where not everybody, where no one person has all the answers or has what is needed in that situation. So situational leadership means that we shift from asking the question, who's in charge, to who brings what's needed now? Who brings what's needed, what the team needs? Who brings what the mission needs? Who brings what the project needs? Who brings what the relationship needs right now? I know in my relationship with my wife, she's incredibly structured and planned. And she brings such amazing structure and planning. Things work like clockwork in our household, and it's very little to do with me. It's because I'm not naturally structured. I like to move, and that fluidity and agility brings something different and is needed in different situations. But when we need structure, when we need good planning, then I definitely step back and let her take the lead. And this is what situational leadership is. But I want to now touch on a really important point, because when it comes to leadership, we can talk about all these ideas, we can talk about tools and techniques and insights and strategies, but where does leadership really start? It starts with you. It starts with the self. It's self-leadership. And that means that we need to learn to lead from the inside out. And the concept that I want to unpack today is, what are you identifying with? Some people identify with being the hard worker. Some people identify with being the smart one, the proactive one. Some people identify with being the one who's always in control, or the decisive one, or the competitive one. Some people identify with the outcomes and the results. Now, what do I mean when I say identify? It means, where do you get your sense of self-worth? Because if you get your sense of self-worth from achieving spectacular results, what does that mean? That means you'll never be able to take your foot off the gas, because taking your foot off the gas will mean that the results stop coming, at least in your mind. If you are somebody who has linked their identity and self-worth to being the one that's always in control, then you'll never allow yourself to be in a space where you're not in control, which will lead you to becoming controlling of life and controlling of factors that you cannot fundamentally control. So the words I am, you see, if you start paying attention to what you say and sometimes what you think, the language you use, the stories we tell ourselves are the audiobooks or the audiobook version of our programming. And so listen out for your language patterns. When you say, I am a control freak, right? What have you done is linguistically, you have started to connect being a control freak, which is trying to control everything that you can't control, with who you are. That is not who you are. That is a behavior. That is a choice. Or you might say, I am the popular one. Well, if you're the popular one, then you've linked your sense of identity to being the one that is always popular. So what does that mean then is you can never be unpopular. And why this is so important for leadership is because, sorry, my one dog's gone missing here. Why this is so important for leadership is because if you are linking your identity, your sense of self-worth, to output, to behaviors, to external striving, then that will pull through into the way that you show up as a leader. And it won't pull through in a positive way. Currently, we're sitting with I would call a pandemic of busyness. The world has become addicted to busyness. And you just have to look at companies, a lot of companies, to see this. What's happening is it's constant work harder, work longer, work harder, work longer. Why? Because it comes from a mindset of lack, that if we don't carry on working hard, then we're not going to have enough. And what is enough? Well, it's what we got to deliver to the shareholders. Now, I'm not taking away from the fact that we need to achieve results. But are your results coming from a place of fear and lack? If I don't, then what? All right, this is a good question to ask yourself. Anything that you think maybe you have become slave to, ask yourself, if you stopped doing that, what's the fear? What do you fear would happen? So if you take somebody who is striving for busyness, they're busy, they just keep going, they cannot rest or care for themselves. Say, well, what would happen if you stopped doing something? If you just stopped and rested? What do you fear would happen? And that's often a good question that will surface the underlying fear program. And that probably would be, well, then things would fall apart. So what you are then doing is you have pegged your sense of identity, your sense of worth, your sense of being okay in the world with your own striving. And if you feel that everything is up to you, absolute determinism, then you'll never ever stop to rest because it's too risky. It risks your sense of self-worth, it risks your results, and so the last thing that I want to share is that leadership, before we even begin to think about how we lead others, we need to look at how we lead ourselves. Because if you cannot rest without guilt, how would you ever allow other people to rest? If you cannot let go of control then how are you ever going to give other people the space to step up and lead when their contribution is more relevant to what's needed than yours? So, what is driving you? What's disturbing you? What's disrupting your clarity? Because when we are in a state of clarity, which is when we are undisturbed, it's when on the inside things are calm. Now that doesn't mean to say that everything around you has to be calm. This is the point. Calm isn't about external factors. Calm is about inner peace. I can be in the midst of something incredibly challenging, incredibly tense, incredibly triggering, but am I able to maintain my inner peace? Because if I can maintain my inner peace, then I have clarity. And with clarity, I can make the right decisions. I can bring presence. But most leaders are trying to lead out of a disrupted internal state, out of disturbance and fear and anxiety. And then we wonder why that is getting translated into the world. Because if you bake a cake with certain ingredients in it, don't expect those ingredients not to be in the cake. If you are making decisions and taking actions and leading from a place of inner turmoil and anxiety and fear and stress, then you're just perpetuating more of that into the world. So the parting shot here is, where are you leading from? Focus on where's your leadership coming from, not what are you doing as a leader, how are you leading. It's where's it coming from, what state? Is it coming from clarity, or is it coming from inner turmoil? And that comes back to the root question is, take away all your striving, take away all your achievements, take away everything. Do you feel that you still have self-worth? Because if your self-worth and your identity are linked to external results, external outputs, external conditions, then you'll never have the clarity you need to lead people with inspiration.